I'm going to tell everybody in school, if you want to see my dad on YouTube, to say on it, the tape never lies. Go shit in the hat.
Yes.
For Lord Cars.
Hear ye, hear ye. Man to the people.
You know it's Cars Keys. Let's get it started up. Give me the car keys. Lakeshore Drive. Blog boys drive away with our texts like car thieves. Break down, we study tape and thrive.
Analytical preparation, that's what cause is given. Cars don't discriminate, teaching the men and women. Each and every week, bears nerd to get your focus. Never manipulating stats, lore, cars no hocus pocus. Cars keys, they're never lost. Checking source, never gonna find a better scouting report. Cars going live with the smartest man, my bestie. Deciphering holes on the defense like Getsy. New show, uniforms, orange with the dark sea. Tape never lies, patrons, this is Cars
You know
Keys.
it's Cars Keys. Let's get it started up. Give me the car keys. Lakeshore Drive. Blog boys drive away with our texts like car thieves. Break down, we study tape and thrive. We gotta break down tape like detectives. No hot takes, just real football perspectives. The Bears nerd dropping science on his terms. TTNL giving Bears press like a perm. Other networks is off with the heads. Stats plus film equals football cred. Analysis like Data 10 tries to shred. McCaskey's letting me cake, we keep the 100 crew fed. Cars Keys, let's get it started up. Give me the car keys. Lakeshore Drive. Blog boys drive away with our texts like car thieves. Break down, we study tape and thrive. Lord Hines in his car, fill up a goblet. Lord Hines in his car, fill up a goblet.
And just like that, we're back. Season 2, episode 23. Cars Keys. Can't believe it. It's football. It's back. Fuck the Lions. Let's go. You guys ready to see the man, the myth, the legend, Maisie's father? This guy?
Not much of a legend. My child is way more the legend, and I can't wait to get the call from school that she's bragging to everybody that she said shit on YouTube and saying it over and over. But hey, everybody, what's going on?
Oh, we're back, man. I'm cautiously optimistic and very, very nervous at the same time. This big game coming up and so much is on the line. I know we covered a little bit last night on Keep It at 100 and that, but I gotta admit, I think my nervousness is at a higher level than my excitement, just because we have so much riding on it. And hey, we all know what it all comes back to no matter what. It's not the offensive line. It's not the defensive line. It's all coming back to QB1. And when you're talking quarterback in Chicago, we've never had a person as talented as this guy. And like I said, man, it's go time, Cars. I want no more excuses. I want no more, this is the second year. I know that there's going to be some hiccups, but it's time to see some big time strides.
And I think that's the hardest part, is because my nervousness is kind of the weight of my own expectations for the team. Yeah. And I think I've talked a bit about, like, I don't have a whole lot of, I have more expectations week one because it's the Packers, but I do expect it to be that slow get up. But I have expectations to see bigger plays and things come
Yeah.
together and more things that go, and that the weight of that, is as a fan that's had my heart ripped out so many times is
Right.
devastating. But it wouldn't shock me if our season was very similar to the team on the television this year, the Detroit Lions, in which it's that slow start, everything's got to come together, you're scoring points. As long as if we're losing, as long as we're scoring points and look like you could see moments, it makes sense. But if it starts off slow and it ends up with, what did they win, like 8 of their last 10, I think is what it was for Detroit. Like that's the springboard year that springs you into
Absolutely.
what is a better year next year.
The benefit of having a horrible year the year before is the schedule and the way that it's set up for us. And I just think it's easy for fans and analysts and quote unquote experts to fall into the trap that it's the same old Bears. And I'm just as guilty, because if they come out and stumble in week 1, it just starts that ball rolling down the hill of it's the Packers, it's Jordan Love versus Justin Fields. And listening to Peter Bukowski and all those guys saying that he doesn't believe that the Bears can pass on Green Bay and their secondary because it's elite level. Well, they better learn to tackle DJ Moore. I mean, there's tape out there showing that's a big time issue. And it's on tape that Justin Fields can make plays. And who was it? Carmen Vital was talking about, the
Jalen Hurts thing.
Yeah. And you're taking that year 2 jump from a team aspect also, but you're putting it all on Justin Fields. Jalen Hurts had the best personnel on offense, the best personnel on defense, with the best offensive line in front of him. And let's not forget, Cars, I brought this up last night. He had 22 touchdown passes with the best personnel. Justin Fields had 17. And this isn't just about stats.
No.
But let's not, if you're going to talk about the Jalen Hurts jump, that isn't saying that Justin Fields has to take the Bears to the Super Bowl. It's not that. It's when you're talking that jump, to me, it's statistically more than team success, because the Bears team is not where Philly was last year. They're not close. But when you tell me that he had 22 touchdowns, yes, 6 interceptions, it's fantastic. Statistically, Justin Fields is not that far away. Big discrepancy in yardage, but he didn't have A.J. Brown last year. He didn't have Devontae Smith last year. He didn't have Dallas Goedert last year. He didn't have the best offensive line in the NFL, and probably backups across that offensive line that would start for 85% of teams in the NFL.
Well, and I think Carmen loses a lot of cred when she's like, let's not talk about that leap, but Jordan Love is going to be a Hall of Fame player. And so much of this right now is just getting lost in the most recent history of everything that we've done. This season is all, as we've been kind of repeating it, it's all on Justin Fields. Not so much in the sense of like whether we win or lose, but it's really just more of, if he shows the development and that growth and how he steps into it, that's what matters. Because this year, as much as I would love to sit down and say, this year we're making the playoffs, do I see a path to it? Absolutely. But really, this is supposed to be that season that launches us into this decade plus of consistent winning, playoff contention, playoff runs, all of that. And it just doesn't make sense to have to kind of to dismiss it before anything. There was a lot of hype after the first game, after a couple of screen passes, and then magically it went away because there were some struggles against Buffalo. It's
Robert Mays and Nate Tice have essentially written Justin Fields off after being on the bandwagon for his entire NFL career, even during this offseason with the upgrades. And they've essentially, just not seeing it.
Not seeing it.
Kind of is what it is. And that's based off what? 2 preseason games. And it's so hot and cold. It's typical NFL fandom because there's no middle ground. You're either Dan Marino or you're Jamarcus Russell, and there's no in between.
Well, and I think we as fans also suffer because it's hard to not necessarily lump this regime in with all the previous ones, but we've been, struggling for so much for so long that as fans are in different clocks than the organization. When the organization reboots like we did and tears everything down to studs, we lump that in with the Pace era, the Phil Emery era, the end of the Angelo era, like all of those different things, they just get lumped in together. And I don't think we can understate just how bad of an experience the Matt Nagy year for Justin Fields and his development. Like they wouldn't even let him compete for the starting position. They drafted him 11th overall and said, Andy Dalton, here it is. And then they put him in, and they put him in with Andy Dalton's playbook, not even his own playbook. They didn't do any of those things. And so, of course it's going to be a struggle. If name any team that we faced last year that had a worse receiving core than we did. Name any team.
You didn't like Simba Webster, Carr?
Yeah, name it.
Being a focal point on third down.
One team gave up a double-digit sack percentage to their quarterback. One, it was us, and it wasn't like it was 10.1. It was almost 14% of every dropbacks ended in a sack. It's last year. Understand and so when people start to complain about Justin and his clock, it's going to take a little bit to get reset because he was constantly under pressure last year. All of these things, when you look at it, Anthony's got a good list of kind of this. Pettis is gone. Harry is not even on a practice squad, I don't believe.
Yeah, he just signed in Minnesota, I believe.
Okay. Pringles is on a practice squad.
Yeah.
EQ is here and Valus is here probably only because he is a third round pick and they think they could still get something from him in this. So when you look at it, it's just disingenuous to say like he can't make that leap. 3,600 yards and 22 touchdowns is not a massive leap.
No.
And
I agree.
Especially with a true number one, with Mooney being one of the better, Mooney and Claypool are kind of one of the better 1 or 2A, 2B type of combos out there. Adding a Robert Tonyan, what they can do formationally, the offensive line, like all of these things. Yeah, it may not look great a lot early, but it's going to look really good, better if Justin Fields takes the step.
Yeah, I hear you. And that, ultimately everything probably we put way too much emphasis on week one. I've said that I feel like they have to approach it with a playoff mentality. I still believe that, but the Bears won week one last year, and it didn't propel them forward. They only won 2 more times after that. But your point is a great one because you want them, when we get to the end of this year, you want everybody outside of the Bears bubble to be like, okay, that is something we have to, they're on our radar now, and we have to worry about them going into next year because they're flush with cap space. They have 2 first-round picks. They have a quarterback. They have DJ Moore under contract, and they have the war chest full to make moves, and they've proved it on the field that the talent is ascending towards the end of the year, and they're
young.
Is
and they're
everything.
Still young. Yep. They're one of the top 10 youngest teams And
Yeah,
that
and they
number
could
is so skewed because of Mercedes Lewis and Patrick Scales. Like you take those two guys out,
yeah.
and they're a top 5
Even
young
even the
team.
kicker, even the I
Yeah.
mean, how old is Cairo?
Santos
30,
is
31?
31.
Yep. So, yeah, no, man, I totally get it. Just real quick update. Detroit drove down and they are up 7-0 over the Kansas City Chiefs. David Montgomery did limp off the field. So I haven't texted DDP yet to see if he's in shambles over that. But some NFL news, cars. Joe Burrow, $275 million to become the highest paid player in NFL history.
It's I always make jokes like I do. It's nice to see a Bengals team that has suffered for as long as they have some good things. It's always nice when some of these.
It was Demo's shoe. So, yeah,
All
I
right,
guess I
good.
should pay attention. It's not like I'm doing a show or anything.
Yeah, no, we're good. But Burrow is just such an incredible guy, and to me, he's kind of the second best quarterback in the NFL. So it just makes a whole lot of sense that that's what he's doing and that's what he's got.
Yeah, absolutely. So, real quick before we start getting into some of these numbers, I know we went around, and I won't ask you season predictions because I think that's just a fruitless endeavor, really. I mean, it can be kind of fun, but give me your cars, keys, predictions for week 1, Bears versus Packers.
So what I find is really interesting is the whole Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs
Yeah.
situation, because I think that's a nightmare if you're a Packers fan right now, because it's not the most talented of offense. It's probably one of the best offensive lines that we'll face early. Although Bakhtiari, you just never know what you're going to get and how consistent it's going to be. And I know what Bukowski says, and we'll talk about it a little later on. I don't really think that passing the ball is going to be an issue against them. They strike me more as a team that's going to be more stout against the run. Gary's coming off the ACL. Preston Smith had a decent enough year, but they don't seem to have the hosses there to necessarily create.
And you don't know what you're going to get from Bakhtiari. I mean, that
you don't.
He could go out for the season, in 3 plays.
plays.
When he's healthy, he's one of the best offensive tackles in the league, regardless of who you're talking about. But he's banged up. But no, it's gonna be interesting.
And when you look at Bukowski, like he's thinking that it's going to be the Rasul Douglas from 2 years ago, not the one that played last year. And Darnell Savage has never lived up to that first round hype. So yes, Jair is a very good corner. I'm not going to take that away, but like that matchup, it's in a weird place that we can sit down and say, if we go 3 wide and it's more Claypool and Mooney, and you've got Kmet in line, they don't have the bodies to me to necessarily match up with that. So it wouldn't shock me if what's going to be interesting is the way that I look at it. The game plans are going to be called a lot the same. Green Bay all preseason long is really focused on the run game to set up the pass to take the pressure off of Jordan Love. I think the Bears are going to look that same way early. And if you we'll talk about it later, but I think it's going to be a higher scoring affair, and I don't necessarily think it's going to be this anybody stomping on each other whatsoever.
So is that your long-winded way of not answering the question?
Yeah, because I'm going to save it to the end.
Okay.
Sorry, it's been a little bit since I've been on a podcast, and I got a lot of words to make up for here. So
I'll give mine. Everybody heard it last night. I did 24-17 Chicago, and my bold prediction was 3 touchdown passes from Justin Fields.
I think that's very much in the realm. That would be, to be honest, I was looking either at like the 24-17, 27-20 type of range.
Mm-hmm.
But I had the same thing with 3 touchdowns from Fields, including probably 2 over the 30-yard like
Yeah,
30-yard passing.
my
type of
one
thing.
very specific one was a 32-yard touchdown to Chase Claypool.
I mean, he's a fun one because if he's fully healthy and he's practicing, so it all looks good.
And motivated. That's the big part.
They don't have a corner physically or a safety because Savage is a very small safety. And the other kid, I believe, isn't that big. I think he's 6'1". They don't have a body to match up with him in that secondary. And so that's going to be an interesting combination as well. Because, yeah, you can, I think Moore will have a good game. I think that it's going to get to the point where where they're not going to be able to have Jair shadow DJ Moore and follow him all over, because I think the other two guys are going to start to eat away at their corners. It just doesn't defensively. I'm not afraid of Green Bay. There's what's a trait that they have that's really good? What's a skill that they have back there?
If you talk about all the question marks that the Chicago Bears have, you can put them all onto Green Bay. The same thing. I mean, do they have more personnel overall on defense? I mean, what did they say? 8 first-round draft picks? Is that what they have?
We'll show it. I'll show a little bit.
Yeah, right. But it's just, there's quote unquote talent. It doesn't mean that they're going to, that they're going to come through. And that's Carmen Vitale was saying that, he's been in this offense for 3 years. That's fan-fucking-tastic. That's great. That Chase Daniel was in a lot of offenses for a long time. It didn't mean that he was going to come out and be a good quarterback. You can know the offense. It's about execution. Things change when somebody is game planning specifically for you. And that was another thing that Bukowski was talking about with Lauren Cox on Locked On Bears. He's like, well, how are they going to game plan for? What are they going to go back to the Utah tape? Well, listen, yes, they will. They'll look at the Utah tape, but they're going to look at they're going to look at the Philly game. They're going to look at the Kansas City game.
And they're going to look heavily at these preseason games as well.
And let's not forget, our offensive coordinator knows him very well. He's going to know where all the nooks and crannies are. He's going to know where all the negatives are. He's going to know what he likes. He's going to know what his dislikes are. He's going to know what Green Bay doesn't want everybody else to know. So that is a big ace up the sleeve for Alan Williams and for the Bears and Flus.
Well, and I think two things. One, if you looked at him in preseason, if you look past the numbers and watch what he did, he didn't look great a lot of the time. There was a lot of missed throws. The accuracy was just not there. And I think the reason I keep going back to this, last year, Matt LaFleur saw a massive shift in what Aaron Rodgers could do. And so it was the least amount of yards. It's the first time he hadn't passed for over 4,000 playing in a complete season since I can't even remember where. They ran the ball way more with him. Aaron Rodgers' yards per attempt were way lower. They were under 7, which hadn't happened since almost a decade ago, if I'm remembering correctly. So they'd started to move to this kind of ball control offense to save that defense a little bit. And that's what you're going to see. The difference, what will tell you quickly, is how accurate Jordan Love is on those throws. He did not consistently do it. He missed a lot of open looks. That is going to be problematic for them. Whereas Rodgers was sort of automatic on a lot of those looks. And his deep ball, hangs a little bit, right?
It a little bit,
fails. And so if he leaves those things up there, it's going to be a problem. And if you don't have Christian Watson on the outside, who is the one guy who can argue demands a double team every now and then, it really is going to increase that focus on that short intermediate stuff for Jordan. If there's pressure, if the play is perfect, Jordan Love looks pretty good. If there is any breakdown that happens all preseason long, Jordan Love does not look good. If the first read is not there, he has looked panicked, and that is consistent.
And that's my number one concern, Cars. And We've seen this from Lovie Smith. We've seen this from an Eberflus defense, not just in Chicago, is that a lot of times they can get very, very stubborn and say, we're just going to maintain, we're going to bend. We'll give up the 15 play drive, but we feel like you're going to make a mistake in one of those drives. And you cannot sit back and let this kid just sit there and read what's going on in front of him. I think you have to come out early and you have to attack Jordan Love and put that doubt into his head. And I think if the Bears come out and, hey, if you're getting pressure with your front four, that's the best thing for anybody. I understand it. Are the Bears front four there yet?
No.
I don't think so. They have a lot of work to do. You can't sit back with your front four. You have to send some of your horses to put this kid under pressure.
And I think it will be a little different this year because you always had to be worried about when plays break down. Aaron Rodgers was extremely good. You can't say that about Jordan, right? So
Right.
you're going to treat him a lot more like a rookie. And one of the few things I would say that Lovey did very well when it was rookies is he would blitz the ever-living hell out of them. He would give them complex looks. He would do those sorts of things. That to me is going to be kind of that taste, because if Watson is out, you're going to see a steady dose of Luke Musgrave. That's just the way that it's going to be. I know he's a rookie, but he's been
everybody in their wide receiver core and tight end. They're all rookies in
and
undrafted second year players and undrafted free agents.
Guys from this year. So you've got to. What they'll be concerned about is being caught in a blitz and a run, because they are like that run offense for the Packers looked great all preseason. They were getting yards. They did this last year. Again, this was the closest they've come as it relates to like balance and pass versus run. I think they were like 53-47 pass to run. So they were extremely close in that with an Aaron Rodgers. Those numbers will get flipped this year. Like their numbers as pass to run may look a lot more like ours did last year because they don't have the horses at the wide receiver core. So the only time they'll be like, if they start getting gashed in the run game because they're getting caught on blitzes, that'll stop it. But I don't think you're going to be as scared. And what's interesting about Bakhtiari is he's still pretty good, but he's not David of 3 years ago.
Right.
So you're going to see, my take is you're going to see heavy rotation on that defensive line. They're just going to keep throwing the bodies, keep moving guys around, and just keeping fresh people to punish that offensive line.
That's the key to it, Cars. I mean, Philly provided you with the blueprint for that.
Oh, yeah.
Last year. And it's keep on throwing fastballs. I totally agree. Now, Joe is, I hope to see a bunch of blitz variations. If that's what you're hoping to see, and if you're going to be upset, we'll see. I don't think
isn't a thing. Like we used to have these exotic things. What it may be is it could, variation could be that you've got Edmonds and Edwards on the field, and they're, line up left hash, right hash. And in one play you send Edmonds, and then the next play you send Edwards, or, and flipping those things around. Defensive guys don't really do a ton of variation until it gets either like 3rd and long and a close game or anything. They tend to play pretty conservatively. Your offensive guys are insane and are willing to do things where it's like, we're going to go 5 wide receivers. We're going to pull an extra offensive lineman off, so we only have 4 linemen. We'll just see what happens. Defensive guys don't do that, but you're going to see it's a start early to see what pass rush we can get from the front four. And then, the first 3rd down, if it's a 3rd and long, then you'll start to see some stuff sprinkled in and mixed and matched. I don't expect to see a ton of variation, though.
So I just wanted to address this one. Ralph says the Packers were 1 win from the playoffs last year, so Bears fans shouldn't overlook this. But Ralph, I would ask you, who was at quarterback for Green Bay? It's kind of a big deal.
Even then, you're looking and they're expecting guys like Wyatt and Quay Walker to make these leaps. They're expecting a return from Rashawn Gary to do
And
that.
they're saying he's going to be on a pitch count.
He absolutely should, because he's that ACL was bad. Like, it was supposed to be a really bad one when it happened. And yeah, Green Bay really was pretty close. But if you remember who they beat last year, okay, like if you kind of the early part of their win schedule was Tampa Bay, New England, and the Bears, right? Those were their first 3 wins. You have the Cowboys, you have the Bears, you have a very bad Rams team, you had a wheels falling off Miami Dolphins team, you had a wheels sort of falling off Minnesota Vikings team, and then you lost at the Lions. There's nobody in that list that you're sitting there going, that is a marquee victory. That is one that you hang your hat on. It just, I understand that, but it's to your point, one win away with Aaron Rodgers while not really beating anybody of any substance. That matters. You lost to Buffalo. You went 0-2 to the Lions. You lost to the Eagles. You lost just kind of in an Eagles game that wasn't as close as the score showed. Yeah, you were 1 win away, but you were getting an easier schedule than you wanted to admit.
Absolutely. Well, let's jump into some of these nuggets that you have.
Let's go. So this is for those of you who aren't, I love to get wordy. I love to get everything, but I wanted to talk about something, and you started to hit on it a little bit, Shane, when you talked about the starters on defense.
Yep.
But I wanted to talk briefly about roster construction. And so, what's really interesting on this is the most draft picks we've had on a roster in the longest time.
Imagine that.
And when you even take that, 17 of the 26 draft picks have come in the last 2 years of this. And I get everybody's fault. Like, they don't want to hear excuses. I and all of that. But of the 53-man roster, 26 of these guys were added this past offseason. 50% of your roster turned over from 2022 to 2023. 17 of them had come the year before. So this is a massive change for us overall. When you look at our starters, so the last game of the Ryan Pace era, 11 of our picks were starters. Now, of his picks were starters. That was over a 6-year period. Now we have one additional. We've only had one first-round pick because Pace traded the one away for Fields. And so only 2 of those picks are first-rounders. But when you look at these, the way that this is built, you were mentioning this, right? 18 drafted starters in Green Bay, 7 of them first-round picks. Minnesota, 14 drafted starters, 4 of them first-round picks. Lions have a really low number, which is, again, why they've been on par with us for so long. They have drafted just as poorly as we are, 5 of them first. But when it gets really more fun for me is those next 2 numbers. We are the second youngest defense in the NFC North behind Detroit. And that is mostly on the heels of and this is just at the starter position, because we've drafted an entire backfield. But that is a 25-year-old starting defense that is 2 years younger than everybody else other than Detroit. When you look at on the offensive side, we are tied for the youngest with our opponent this week in Green Bay. Minnesota's older. One of the things that doesn't bode well for the overall future of Detroit is that their offense is an older offense. When you start seeing 27, I know that doesn't necessarily feel old, but what that means is once you start hitting over 26, 27, it means you have more guys over the age of 30 on that roster than you want. So, that'll be Taylor Decker is 30. I think Vaitai is over 30. Ragnow is over 30. Jared Goff will turn 30 in the season. So when I sit down and say, like, I think us to be, we may have a slower start when you have changed over 50% of your roster, right? I have 50% of my roster change over year to year, and I'm one of the younger teams on both sides of the ball as fact for on both sides of the ball because of just gelling and figuring these things out. Yeah, there may be some more hiccups than we like, but this is, again, the finishing of that time of ripping the Band-Aid off of everything that Ryan Pace failed to do.
So off topic a little bit, but it's so significant I got to talk about it. So the Burrow deal came in at 5 years, 275 million with 219 million guaranteed.
He's not, when you look at it,
he could have said, I want it all guaranteed and got it. Let's be honest.
But he's not, he's done it consistently.
Yep.
The difference between Hurts, right? He's done it 1 year, he had a great year, but it was 1 year and he got paid off of it, and that shows up. This is a dude that totally shows up every year. I mean, what they went to the Super Bowl playing all road playoff games, all road underdog playoff games, and won every single one of them. And he was a big part. It's a fun time to watch some of these young quarterbacks, and you hope that you have it. But Alex H has a good point here. And this isn't to take. I always hate because people get really defensive over quarterbacks, especially minority quarterbacks. It doesn't mean that Hurts is not very good, but that offensive line, if they take a step back this year, Hurts is going to look different, and that makes a big difference. The other thing I wanted to say here is the average defensive age, a factor in an outlier like Yannick. Yannick is still relatively young. He's 28 years old. The oldest guys on the starter are he and Billings, and you've got the replacement for Billings.
Yeah. Well, that's right there.
And Walker.
Cars. That is the key part. Just you saying we have the replacements.
Yes.
Is something that this team has never done. Ever.
Never.
They've never done it.
No.
And we've been banging the drum for decades at this point for them to think about things like that. If Jerry Angelo had Darnell Mooney, that was it.
I mean, he did that with Johnny Knox.
Yeah.
He did it with Bernard. They did it with
Devin
Bernard
Hester.
Berrien.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you got that guy, and you're like, okay, next position. You're absolutely right.
We can move on. And that's the thing that has me excited about polls. Let's be honest. The Bears team has proven nothing yet to this point.
Yep.
Out of everybody in the organization, if you had to ask me where I have the most amount of my faith in this organization, it's not in Eberflus. It's not even in Kevin Warren. I have most of my faith in the general manager of the Chicago Bears.
Isn't it weird to say?
Yeah.
Like, a guy who says, I know we need to build through the draft, and does it. Yeah. Traded for a player and got additional picks instead of throwing all the picks away. Yes, we had the first pick, and that plays a factor. But, like, he maximized what he got out of Carolina instead of giving the max to Carolina.
And the thing about it is, Cars, we sat here and talked. Like, you and I talked privately, not on air, about, man, how fucking great would it be if you dropped to 2 and then made your free fall. And that was exactly what their blueprint was. That was what they did, because he wanted to maximize the return completely. But he just got to the point where the return from Carolina was so good, and he didn't
want to
have 100% faith in Houston consummating a deal. He couldn't pass it up. But
no, and I agree. And I know I'm a little different from you and Phil in the regards. Like, I am higher on this staff because this is a well coached team. The talent wasn't
Yeah, and
there.
I don't dislike them. I
Yeah, I know.
I have
Yeah.
to push. I'm waiting to see more. I can't sit here and
Oh,
I'm not
absolutely.
throwing everything behind these guys and just going to go off blind faith. To me, Ryan Poles has kind of mentally been doing, if I look at the situation, kind of doing what I would have done. And that's where it doesn't mean that I'm
What
right,
we've all, but like what
but what we've
Philadelphia
wanted.
has done,
Yeah.
what Green Bay has done. When you look at these teams that have been built and had steady decade plus winning seasons, competing for playoffs, all of them are built through the draft. Majority built through the draft. When you have a chance, Tremaine Edmonds, I don't think we appreciate how much of an outlier it is to get someone of his talent, his youth in the free agent market. And we did that solely because Buffalo overcommitted to a playoff run that they thought was going to end in a Super Bowl that ended the very second Von Miller got injured. So when you can do those things, look at the investments of who got multi-year deals in free agency. You know, like it is Tremaine Edmonds, right? He got multiple years. You have a couple years for Walker, but he's not getting paid primary because if you get someone better, he's your second string right
Same with
away.
TJ Edwards. You can move off of him after this year.
TJ Edwards,
With
who
no
is a
problem.
guy, and I'll talk on later, who I think is going to have more of an impact than anybody recognizes. All of their moves, if you look past some of this reactionary offensive line stuff that they had to do, all of the guys that they signed are 28 or younger. And when I say 28, you had three guys. It's Walker, Billings, and Yannick that are over 28. Everybody else is 25, 26, young guys. So instead of overpaying for age, like a Robert Quinn at 30, like over 30, and there is still ceiling for the guys that they signed to help the kids that they drafted develop.
If you're going to pony up in free agency, you limit the risk by paying for a guy that's 25 years old in Tremaine Edmonds, and that you don't go out and pay a 29-year-old defensive lineman top of the market money, because it's just you roll. Listen, you have to play the percentages, especially in free agency. It's a fucking minefield. Cars, we've talked about that forever, and I get it. And listen, classic case tonight. Chris Jones is in Kansas City, and there's been a lot of talk and fans and Poles was there and bring him to Chicago. But at the same time, you tell me are the Bears ready for that? And Khalil Mack was what, 26 at the time the Bears traded for him?
Yeah.
Jones is, I believe, 29 years old right now.
Correct.
He's a fantastic talent. If you could get him for a second rounder, then it's okay. You just fucking do it. I get it. But if you're talking if you're talking a first rounder that you're talking Chicago's or Carolina's under the circumstances, listen, if they were to consummate that deal tonight, Cars, that is 100% rock solid. Justin Fields is the guy. He's going to get paid in Chicago. Period. End of sentence. No question.
And we think we have a playoff run.
Yep.
And again, that is why Yannick is here. Is they don't necessarily think they have a playoff run as of yet, but what they've seen in that move. Sorry, I am. It's exciting, fun thing to talk about. That move tells you that the Bears are more excited about this roster and the team in itself. Because if you don't think you can win, you're not going to go out and spend the money that you did on Yannick. But you think you have a chance at winning and that he can turn the ties. That is why you make that move. Chris Jones seals that move. That move tells you, not only are we better than we think, we are playoff ready, and we think we can make a push, right? And absolutely.
The word tonight was he was looking for 3 years, $84 million until he saw the Bosa deal.
Well,
and now it's changed.
but the Bosa deal to me was also kind of to your earlier point. San Francisco, not that I don't like Javon Hargrave, but you're
Yep.
telling me that you're willing to pay Javon Hargrave for 3 years, if I remember correctly, a
Yep.
good amount of money, a 30-year-old guy that just had his first double-digit sack season in his career as part of a rotation, and you're going to tell me that you're going to sign him and potentially, and they were seemingly close to just not trying to offer him the amount of money. You're going to sign a 30-year-old guy over Nick Bosa
Right.
and do that? That is how bad decisions get
Yep.
made. And you're absolutely
I
right.
agree.
Chris Jones is a different timeline for us. But again, as fans, we need to understand that unique move tells us that this team, this staff, this front office is way more bullish on the talent on this team than any of these pundits. And so far, I will tell you that I trust Ryan Poles' kind of ability to look at that and see what the division is. We'll
Right.
see, but I do think that that's a big statement.
Yeah, Wade, I don't know if you've been here before. I'm not sure. Maybe you have, and I'm just not aware of your comments. But we address bullshit comments like this because you're making things up with no basis for what you're saying. The Buffalo Bills 100% wanted back Tremaine Edmonds. They could not afford him because of the decisions that they made, the financial moves that they made. If you think that it had something to do with Tremaine Edmonds' talent, you're completely clueless about
Yeah.
what you're talking about.
You-
So
I mean, he is right. They made no offer, so at least half that statement is correct.
yeah,
But you can't offer a guy $2 million when he's going to go make 15, 16, 17 on the open market. That's just not it. And it's
and if
It's-
they would have had the money available, guess where Tremaine Edmonds would be right now?
still there.
In Buffalo.
And it's something I didn't even put up, but we should have. The captains on this team are a 25-year-old Tremaine Edmonds, a 26-year-old DJ Moore, a 25-year-old Justin Fields, and a 29-year-old Eddie Jackson. So This is also the youngest captain group we've had since that early 2000s Bear team when they were building up to something.
Yeah,
So
and that matters. And when you bring up
does.
Edmonds again, Edmonds at 20 on a veteran-laden defense in Buffalo was voted a team captain. And that's one of the main reasons that they brought him here, because the Bears, if it works out with Fields, they look at Fields obviously as the pillar piece to the entire team. They needed that guy on the other side of the ball. And that's what they think that Tremaine Edmonds is, based on age, based on leadership. Talk to anybody in Buffalo. My brother-in-law was in the chat room tonight, Guy Rosenbarker, and he's a Buffalo Bills fan.
Wade, we just did. They had no cap money to do it. That is why. Listening is a good skill to pick up here, but if they had 20 million in cap, he would be there. They had 2 million in cap after they cleared a whole bunch of space. That is why they didn't make him an offer.
Yeah, and listen, what is his name? Was it Wayne or Wade? Whatever, Wade. Yeah, they didn't have the money. Talk to anybody from Buffalo. The general manager came out and literally said that they wanted Edmonds back, but they just knew that was going to be a byproduct of their roster construction and the window that they were in.
They had to make the decision. They chose
pay a quarterback, you end up losing good players.
So and this year is not a big contract year for Josh Allen. It's 18.
Yeah.
But they've got, I think it's something like 7 to 10 players that are in that $10 million range. What they decided they would do is Matt Milano is a good linebacker, but he's not as in demand. He's making $7 to $8 million, and that was
Miller.
the decision.
Nobody's talked about him yet.
Von Miller is a massive deal, and they couldn't restructure. Josh Allen coming into this season, if you try, is over 120 million of dead cap this year. You've got Stephon Diggs, if I remember when it was thought he was going to try to be traded, I think he's around 50-ish million of dead cap.
Yeah.
You know, we always hear from someone on the network that the cap, the cap is fake. The cap is real. At some point, you have to come pay for it, and the Bills hit that moment this year because you can't keep doing you.
Fuck
They
a
win
cap
all in.
works when you're a Super Bowl contender. That's when you say, if you're a Super Bowl contender in 2023, you can say fuck 2025, 2026, 2027. We're going to go for it right now. And then you can massage the cap and do things like that. But you can only fuck a cap for so long. And then, listen, it's like owing Tony Soprano money. At some point, they're going to come knocking at your door at 4 a.m. and it's time to pay the piper.
You can only have so many can only have so many premium players. This isn't the, like just like the NBA when you can have 2 or 3
I think
players.
Wade must be behind, or maybe we can get him a coupon for a hearing aid because he's Wade.
Yeah, they paid him $7 million, not 15.
So,
and by the way, they're like $500,000 under the cap right now. So, they unless they added 2 zeros to that cap magically, it wasn't going to happen. But anyway, I digress. So that starts off part of the reason for the good. I am going to make us all sad for a moment. We're going to talk a little bit to remind everybody about where we're coming from and what we need to come back from. If we look at a couple of things that are going to be extremely sad. If you look at, we were 30th in plays. So we had only Tennessee and I think it was Atlanta had less offensive plays than we did last year. We were heavy run, and we were the only team that had a lower net yard per pass than we did per rush. So it was a better play for us last year to rush the ball, especially because of the offensive line, and we were the only team that had a double-digit sack percentage. It was 13.3 overall, was 14+% for Justin Fields.
Yep.
Only 2 games over 400 yards of offense, 9 games under 300. This is the EQ Dante Pettis hell that we were in. And everybody likes to talk about Justin was a running quarterback. It's not true. Like, in the sense of 1/3 of his carries were scrambles. They were designated pass plays that protection broke down or wide receivers couldn't get open. 642 of it, over 50% of his yards came on scrambles. It was a scramble drill. It was, all of these things happened. It wasn't a good year. And so we say all of that because that sets kind of the floor to this. And this is going to be the last time I talk to Wade, and we'll just do this. You're right. He's not worth 20 million, and that's why the Bears are paying him 14.5. So you're dead on straight. He's not worth 20 million a year. Thank you. So when you start off kind of from that statement, right, that is as bad as it can get. And so when you look at, like, do you trust Luke Getsy? We don't know who Luke Getsy is still. I think we have an idea of the way that he called plays early on in the season, what he wants to be, but we lacked the talent to do that. We don't know what Justin Fields is really as a quarterback. We have different ideas. We have different hopes for that. I'm a believer of him. I've made a big deal, right? He's the one of the first signed jerseys I have hanging in my basement here because I believe that he's going to take a step here in the right direction. We don't know, what the ceiling is going to be. I think it'll shock a lot of people to understand that our running game this year can be better, and it will be better. Like, if I told you, and I'm sorry I'm going to hurt some of your some feelings here, but if I told you that David Montgomery was the least explosive back last year of anybody that had over 100 carries, in which only, and what I mean by explosion is 15 yards or more on a rush. David Montgomery in 201 carries did that 3 times.
This is the perfect time for this comment.
Perfect time for that, right? He was the least expensive or least explosive guy. Guess what? Donta Foreman, I don't know why I went Freeman, but we'll walk past that. Foreman saw 8 in the box, 10% more of the time, and had 4 times as many explosive runs. So when you add that as a feature, and if you add in Roschon and what he can do, and Khalil was extremely explosive as well, right? I think both he and Donta were 5% plus explosive runs. That's a really good rate out of a running back. If you can get more out of that run game this year, and you will, that is going to carry over. And that doesn't even begin to cover in the guys in the line about how the line is going to be better. And I know there's concern about Nate Davis, but we saw, I guess if you're one of the other guys' listeners, you'll disagree with this, but Jatiri Carter played a fantastic preseason and showed how good he was at getting to the second level. With a better line and more explosive running backs, if the running game gets better, now all of a sudden the passing game is a lot easier to go. Last year when we talked about how good the run game was, it was Justin Fields. This year it's going to be that group of people that we're talking about.
Yeah, and then the ultimate wild card in all of that is the running back draft pick this year with Roschon.
How they bring him along.
Mm-hmm.
And again, when I sit down and say like they may have a slow start, Roschon may be a guy that they run Khalil and they run Donta early in the season a lot more. And you see 2, 3, 4 carries for Roschon. But as you watch his carries as the season progresses and watch everybody's carries as that moves, that pendulum, if it starts to swing as heavily as it, is there a good chance that Roschon is the starter by the end of the season? Absolutely.
Oh, I think it's almost a given at this point, Cars. And
yes.
I don't even think it's going to take half the season. And I'm on record. I know Phil is on record. This isn't a slight towards Khalil Herbert.
No.
Big fan of Khalil. If I was the head coach or if I was the general manager, I would make my thoughts very known on this. I think he should be in the same role that he was last year. As the change of pace guy that can come in and inflict damage there. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I don't know if he's a guy that you put more on his plate if you're going to get more success. I just don't think he's that guy, because people are saying that, talking about his pass pro, you go back to the very first play of preseason to Blazing Game for the first down. Just go watch Khalil. And I know I think it was Alex Shapiro was praising him for that. It was a hideous attempt. It was awful.
Atrocious effort.
It was awful.
Yeah.
And just like with Justin Fields, and we can go back to Mitch, in crunch time, when your nuts are on the line, you're going to revert to what you're comfortable with. And he is not good at pass pro at all.
Nope.
Almost zero effort with it. I get a little bit leery when I think that they are going to try to expand what they do with Khalil. And I don't want to say they're going to showcase him, because I don't think that's the way that this backfield is going to work. I think it's just a benefit to the offense overall to keep him in that role where he led the league in yards per carry in that role.
The only reason I say that I think Roschon is going to be later is we know the shelf life of these running backs.
I agree with that. Yep.
And so it wouldn't shock me if it started off where it's Foreman that is actually like they'll make that switch where it will be Foreman early. And we saw a really good Foreman in Carolina last year. We saw him in stacked boxes and how he punished people. Like that's a good change. And they're gonna, again, look at this year as a launch year into next year when that's the expectation of a deeper playoff run to a potential Super Bowl run. So everything in mind of they're good. Last year, if they could start a guy and be like, this is going to give us a bigger chance or play this person more,
right?
And it's going to give us a bigger chance to win. That's not going to be what they do this year, or that's not what they did last year. That's going to be what they do this year. Early on, they're going to start these kids. They're going to give them all snaps. They're going to try to get them assimilated so that the Dexters, the Pickens, the Roshans help us win later in the season when we are building towards something. And if we get really good and we start showing wins early with these kids developing, the one thing I say that is my biggest positive about this coaching staff is they are a great teaching staff. Braxton Jones got better. Tevin Jenkins was a malcontent, was not happy. They reached him. I understand he's injured now. They reached him. They developed him. They got him to buy in at guard. They got him to move over to left guard.
Right.
They have developed these young players. The growth that Kyler Gordon had from week 1 to week 17 was not the same kid. This is a great coaching staff who is very passionate.
He may have made a bigger jump than anybody, Gordon.
Oh, and if you look at on defense, he is one of those players I am legit the most excited to watch because he and we'll talk about defense here, but he's one of those guys that plays with this chip, with this swagger.
Yep. You have to have it at that position, man. You have
We've been missing swagger all over this roster, and he's got it in spades. So with that, let's go into the offense because there's a few things I want to set, like when we start talking about expectations. So early on especially, expect this to be less designated runs. You're going to see this closer to 50-50. If the passing game tears off, you're going to see that switch. But there's still going to be sort of this run first until they can be more certain in how Fields is seeing things and how the lines are going. But the second one may hurt some feelings. Do not expect 4,000 yards passing.
No, I totally agree.
It's a beautiful dream. But we would have to pass the ball 550 times plus to get there. Last year, it was Josh Allen was the lowest amount of attempts to 4,000 yards, and he had, I think it was 567 or something like that. We're not going to see this team be at a 550 passing. If you want to use Jalen Hurts as a great example, he threw 460 times last year at an 8+ clip, and he was at 3,600 yards. 3,600 yards feels like a very realistic thing. And let's not lie, for a Bears quarterback, that's a hell of a good year. It's the touchdown numbers for Justin that you really need to watch. The touchdown numbers more than the yards will tell you exactly what's going on. Offensive line, I'm a big believer in that they're better. We saw this. We saw depth in the preseason, whether it was Ja'Tyre Carter. The coaching staff should get some credit. Larry Borum is thinner, and he might not be great, but he looked better. He looked more in shape and more ready.
He did. Yeah, he bought in. I mean, and he needed to, Carter. He was way too heavy last year.
He was so chunky. But if you look at this, if that offensive line is better, that is going to be. I'm saying this no tongue-in-cheek whatsoever. I'm probably one of the older guys here. Shane and I are both probably older guys here than some of the folks in the chat. This is the best wide receiver and tight end group we have ever had in my lifetime, bar none. Like yes, Brandon Marshall was a world beater, but like you didn't have full-on Alshon the whole time, and you didn't have anything after those two. Marty Bennett was great. He couldn't really block, but this is a group like you go 3, 4 deep in that wide receiver room with Tyler Scott coming in. You add in Robert Tonyan and you add in Mercedes Lewis, who we probably don't give enough credit to yet, and he's going to be a fun one in the way that he blocks and is basically a sixth lineman who can also catch the ball. This group is the most talented we have ever had. That's insane. And last but not least, the way you'll know that this is starting to get here and that the offense is going is what you saw in week 1. When you start to see more yards after catch on simple plays, the offense is working when it is not pass is caught, guy is tackled. Pass is caught, guy is tackled. Once that goes away and we see more of those, like where is Justin really good? That 10 to 15 yard accuracy. That is where you see the most yards after catch.
Hello, DJ Moore.
Yes. Hello, Chase Claypool. Like,
hello, Cole Kmet. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you're going to see this. And now what is very different for us, and I sort of wrote about it the one day, but it's, we'll start out and we'll probably go, 21 formation, right? So it'll be Blasingame, it'll be Kmet, it'll be Moore, and it'll either be Mooney or Claypool. The next play, you're going to pull out Blasingame. Are you going to set in Tonyan and go heavy? Are you going to send in the other wide receiver? Are you going to change out the backs? Like the pieces that we have and how we can manipulate them with proven. The difference between us and Green Bay this year is the amount of proven talent at these different positions. I'm not saying necessarily all pro. Musgrave isn't proven. Their second guy is also a draft pick at the tight end Rube. Daubs didn't show a ton. Samari Toure didn't even really play last year.
Right.
There is talent that now we can do this in waves. And much like we talked about the defense, Shane, I can swap out guys in my skill position left and right and just be ready to go.
Yeah, it goes back to, and again, this isn't a negative on Sanborn, but we were all excited about his play last year. And what did this front office do? They didn't just say, all right, out with Roquan, Sanborn is next, so we're set there. They didn't do that. If you go back and you rewind TTNL, we said in a perfect world, if Sanborn can be your number 3 or number 4 linebacker on a really good team, that's fantastic. That means that you have depth. I don't think any of us expected the Bears to go out and pay Edmonds and pay Edwards. I think you were in the same boat with me. We saw TJ Edwards. We weren't shocked by the player, but we said, all right, there's their move at linebacker. What's next? Well, what's next was Nate Davis, and then literally 30 seconds later, Jermaine Edmonds, when we were hitting go live here in the studio
and then
to talk about the
on
signings.
Top of that, Shane?
Yeah. And then they went out and drafted Noah Sewell. That's what I'm saying. That is the biggest difference that they have never done and that we have been preaching forever. And Cars, this is getting way, 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 way down the rabbit hole, and a lot of things have to go wrong to even get here, but it's exactly why you keep a guy like Tyson Bagent that has shown you upside.
Yeah.
You just don't know.
No.
You don't know. I mean, when Trent Green went down, Kurt Warner came out of nowhere. When Drew Bledsoe got hurt. Yeah, exactly. But that is why you do it. You don't just, all right, fuck it. We have our guy. We traded for Jay Cutler. We're going to give him Johnny Knox. That's set there. We're good.
Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace would have kept PJ Walker.
100%.
Instead of Tyson Bagent, right? Like that's 100%. For real. You're absolutely right. Like we know that these guys are proven commodities. These are, even though they're not, and we would make that excuse and we would just move over. You're 100% right. And again, that's why there's the faith. They recognize that you've got to build this stuff for waves. It's not just running back by committee anymore. In all of these positions, if you can't If you're not Cincinnati and you don't have T. Higgins as a number 2, or you're not you're not a trying to even think, you're not Kansas City, right? And you can get rid of Tyreek Hill and still be able to do it and still be able to perform because you've got a Travis Kelce. It's all, if you can't add a stud, you add a chess piece. It is,
Right.
and it is what Poles has done across all of these different skill positions is, yeah, Mooney's not a number 1. I think we saw that. But guess
Yeah,
what?
and
He's a high level 2.
yeah, and even Cars, even on a fantastic team, he could be a number 3, and that's not a negative. That's what people
No.
need to get over, and they get so caught up into you think he sucks because he's not a number 1. No, on any team, the Eagles drafted Devonta Smith in the top 10. Did it prevent them from going out and getting AJ Brown? No, listen, you have to keep adding. It's not anything against Darnell Mooney. The Chase Claypool move. They went
Yeah.
out and got DJ Moore. You have to keep on trying to make moves there.
But that's a great point about Devonta Smith, right? Like,
Yeah.
He had an up and coming year. His rookie year it was just shy of 1,000 yards,
Yeah.
handful of touchdowns. He looked great. The Bears of old would have said he's a number 1.
That's
We
it,
don't
yeah.
need to do anything.
We'll
would
save
not
money
have
here
made
for
that
the
move.
next 2 or 3 years before we have to pay. Yeah.
And then what did AJ Brown do? He made Devonta even better. And so that's what you're doing. This competition, this Claypool Mooney competition for who's the number 2, it's just going to elevate one of the 2 guys. It's just going to make them get there. And it's just so different. We're setting up for waves and we're ready to go.
Yep. I hear you, man.
We'll do defense real quick here. We started this. There's way more talent and depth this year than any time that we've ever. And there are 6 new starters on defense this year. That's an insane. So I think it's 4 on offense, 6 on defense as new starters. That is a massive upheaval. I think if anybody watched that 1920 drive, and that emphasis on setting the edge is why we were 31st in rush defense last year. And is why Gibson isn't here. Yes, getting to the passer is important, but you can't get gashed. That's why that's here. I think the pass rush will not be as bad as folks think. Yannick is going to be a great addition. I think Walker is going to make a big impression. I'm really excited for Dexter and Pickens as the season moves on, as they're part of the rotation and what they're going to do. I think that's going to help Justin Jones even take another step. If Dominique Robinson can start to show some faith, some reason why this team has the faith in him, they do. This goes from a below average to a really good, really solid pass rush pretty quickly. They will not be a bottom 3rd run team again. That alone is worth 3 to 4 wins. So when you start when are these victories going to come in? Some of these losses were just simply, we couldn't stop running the ball for anybody. It wouldn't have mattered if they put Shane or I back there on the opposing team. We would have been able sometimes to get 4 or 5 yards a carry because of how it happens. This is going to look a lot more like the Lovey cover 2 defenses of old, in the sense that this is going to be a turnover defense. Yannick is very good at it. The linebackers are really good. These are 2 linebackers that are 2 of the higher rated ones in pass coverage. They do a lot in getting passes defended. That's going to make us say this is aggressive. I say this not tongue-in-cheek at all. Edwards is going to have a bigger impact than many are expecting. Go back to that 1920 drive and listen to the way that the coaching staff talks about what Edwards brings to this team. He is a leader, maybe not the same way that Edmonds really is, but he is a leader. He is smart. He is intelligent. People are drawn to him, and it works. And I say this again, Pickens and Dexter. Last but not least, and that's why Brisker is there as the background. We have not had a confident team in this defense for a long time. This idea of when you heard Tyler Scott on the Adam Rank podcast or on the Rank Sick podcast, and he said Jaquan was just sitting there saying over and over again, why can't it be us? Why not us? When
There's
you look
at the D Rose speech, why not me?
Why not me? Like when you hear about what Walker was doing in practice, how he was making everything a competition, challenging everybody. When you hear how the staff does it, when you hear how Edwards and Edmonds do it, when you hear about how Tyreek Stevenson is coming to Jalen Johnson and to Kyler Gordon and these guys to pick their brains and understand the nuances and watch the way that Hoke was interacting with the players and the way that he's coaching and doing all this. We haven't, the offensive side is a quieter team. Claypool is probably the biggest talker on that side.
Yep.
That defense is loaded with those, and that sort of thing just gets contagious. You get a turnover and they start talking.
Oh yeah.
That becomes another turnover. They start feeling it. They start flowing.
And it spreads even faster on a young team, Cars. It really does. Because then you when you're young and inexperienced and you get that confidence, when you start to play with that aggressive nature, then it's fuck you, Kansas. I don't care if we're playing Kansas City. I don't care who we're playing. They get that dog in them like we've been talking about forever. They get the I don't give a fuck who we're facing, where we are, if we're on the road, what elements we're playing in. It spreads like wildfire, and it's absolutely critical to any team.
Look at that New England game and that crazy interception that Brisker had of the Mac Jones ball.
Yep.
Like that tore off, and that defense played one of its better games the remainder away. They took Mac Jones out. They had to go back to Bailey Zappi, who did not look good either. That was that sits down, and all of a sudden it, to your point, Shane, it just carries over. And when you have these big plays, and if you, again, I keep talking about the 1920, but if you look at the way that all those guys ran to Edmonds on the sideline, that they're all hovering around Edmonds, that they're all picking his brain and talking to him about these things. Those things as a group, it all of a sudden you see Jaquan Brisker get that interception, it becomes, well, why not me? Why can't I go get that next one? Why can't I go get that next turnover?
Yeah.
When you heard Javon Dexter talk about what was his favorite play of the preseason, and it was Zach Pickens and Travis Bell's first sack, that was genuine to me. I don't think that was just something that he said. When this team believes in it and you buy into the hype, it's contagious. That Dick Duran team that went 13-3 was not a very talented team.
No.
But when you start to believe in yourself like that, it carries sometimes way greater than what talent really should.
Sure does. And if you throw the development of Justin Fields on top of it, it just makes then you're pouring gasoline on the fire.
And that's the fun of this season. Like, this season is not going to be, I need Robert Quinn to go get 20 sacks and break a record. The fun of this season is, hey, I want to see Justin Fields throw for 3,500 and 25 touchdowns. I want to see Kyler Gordon pick off 6 passes out of the nickel this year, right? Like, I want to see Pickens and Dexter start manhandling guys. I want to see Darnell Wright just absolutely dominate the guy across the line from him. Every player that you think about right now that you are excited, take away Justin Fields. Take every other player that you are super excited to go watch. They are 26 or under, most likely. So they're going to be here for a while. So it's just nice to be in a place where development matters, and we're going to be able to really just to go.
Imagine. Been begging for it for decades, like I said, and it's not, I always listen to go back to what Olin said when he was on with us. He's like, I went up and to the offices upstairs and knocked on the door, and he's like, Lovey came on, and he's like, Lovey, our offensive line is fucking terrible.
Yeah.
you gotta get us some help. And they went out and got him Frank Omiel.
Yeah.
I think he was a free agent from Seattle.
Carolina.
Or is that where he came from? Yeah.
I believe so.
So
yeah.
he the defense had Urlacher and Briggs and Peanut and Nathan Vasher, and the list goes on and on. And what do? Then they go out and they make the move. I guess Vasher wasn't there at that time, but they go out and they make the move for Julius Peppers.
Yep.
And to give them another amazing talent on that, on that side of the ball. But this shows you how flawed roster construction can be, because I can remember being very excited about Julius Peppers, the acquisition. But you know why the Bears got him? Do you remember why? They traded a second-round draft pick to Tampa for Gaines Adams, and he died in his sleep.
Which was a trade that never should have been made to begin with.
Could never understand it when it happened. I'm like, where it came out of the blue. And, unfortunately the kid died, that off season. And then they had no first round draft pick as a result of the Cutler trade.
Mm-hmm.
They had no second round draft pick as a result of the Gaines Adams trade. And he died. And then you back the Brink truck up to Carolina to Julius Peppers' house and pay him. But that is the area that the Bears have lived in. Bad drafting, supplementing it with bad contracts in free agency that aren't sustainable.
And that Super Bowl team, though, is really the one that you want to start to focus on, because that team was a majority drafted roster, right? Like that 2005 team, you're talking, when you talk about the biggest players in there, you're talking, it's Tommy Harris, it's Urlacher, it's Briggs, it's Peanut, it's all these guys. This was, after that point, is when they started to do ridiculous, stupid trades and start to throw away first round picks. And they went from being a draft driven franchise to let's patch a hole with aging Reuben Brown, and let's patch a hole with this guy off the scrap heap and see if he's got a season left. The second you give up on the draft, you are hurting yourself for years. And that is what Ryan Pace did his entire time. It's one thing to not draft well and throw it, but the Bears just didn't even try anymore. They were just like, we'll just throw money at it and it'll get fixed. And it was
yeah, and that's the thing. And I mean, this is again going down the rabbit hole, but after that Super Bowl, their first pick in the draft, they drafted Greg Olsen, which we were all excited about at the time. He didn't last here because of Mike Martz, unfortunately. But the Bears, their second round draft pick that year was Dan Bazine.
Beast. And the third round pick was Garrett Wolfe.
Yep. And Garrett Wolfe played, a handful of games for the Bears, never had any impact. Greg Gabriel talked about Lovey saying, we need Garrett Wolfe on this roster. We need him. So the front office went and got the guy that the head coach wanted, and then Lovey really never played him. But the problem was Dan Bazine was a second round draft pick, and he never played a snap in the NFL. And yes, injuries happen, but the Bears drafted Michael Okwo, a linebacker from Stanford, third round, never played in the NFL. The Bears drafted Joaquin Iglesias, a wide receiver from Oklahoma, in the third round. I saw his one and only touchdown in a preseason game in Buffalo. He played one special team snap for the Minnesota Vikings in the NFL. Jerron Gilbert, the Bears took
5 games total. Jerron Gilbert.
Yep, 5 games total. And that's, I mean, you can go back. I mean,
you drafted Chris Williams pre-injured with a back. You drafted Gabe Carimi, who came off of knee injuries. You had Mark Colombo that you drafted. that came pre-injured. And these were your first round picks.
Yeah.
Like, sure, you got a little bit, but you drafted pre-injured guys. That's why I always hit on, like, where are your draft picks coming from? It is.
But Cars, I'm not sure if you can show me another team in that era that not only whiffed on picks, but they didn't even play in the NFL. You're talking premium second and third round picks on a team that was deep.
Yep.
And Okwo never played. Gilbert, 5 games. Wolf never had the impact. He was on the roster for a while. Iglesias, I believe it was 1 special team snap for the Minnesota Vikings. 3rd round draft pick. Gaines Adams, you give up a 2nd rounder for it. And yes, I know you can't plan on the kid dying, but to Carr's point, that trade never should have been made in the first place. You give away Greg Olson for a 3rd round draft pick. You trade another 3rd round draft pick for Ricky Manning, who came to you. Remember the Denny's incident? They were throwing away draft picks like they were candy. Yes, Ricky Manning had some really nice games for the Bears, but when you look back on it, with everything that they threw away draft wise, it was just, then you wonder why they're in the position that they've been in for so long, and that the throwing away draft picks like Ryan Pace did on a yearly basis in trading up. You know, I got to go from 11 to 9 to go get Leonard Floyd, which if you go back and you look at that draft, Leonard Floyd was one of the better draft picks in the first round. But you can't miss on Kevin White. Yes, I know you can't plan for injuries. Just no impact with a top 10 pick. No impact. Do you remember I think 2002 it was, Cars? Do you remember Roosevelt Williams from Tuskegee, the corner?
Because remember, it became the joke of what random small school defensive back is Jerry Angelo going to draft in
when
the
they
second
drafted
round?
Peanut Tillman. 95% of the fan base is like, who the fuck is that?
Yep.
You know, they hit on him.
Yeah. You absolutely nail, like, it's concerning the amount. And if you think about it, Ryan Pace was here for 6 years. I think the only guys on this team that have ever received a contract extension during the Ryan Pace era, once you get past Tariq Cohen, is Cody Whitehair and now Cole Kmet. Over 6 years, you had 3 draft picks that got extensions from the team. Or at least, you know, like, I don't want to, like, when you look at like DeAndre Houston Carson and things, I wouldn't really call those extensions, right? Those were year-to-year deals.
Right.
The only, and sorry, thank you, Joseph Belinsky. Yes, Eddie Goldman and Eddie Jackson. So there are 5 guys that received contract extensions from 6 NFL drafts. And Eddie Jackson lived up to his contract for a while.
Tariq did get one too, but
yeah, so it's insane. You can't you can't sit down and say, I've got 4 top 10 picks and not a single one of them sees a contract extension. Not a single one.
You can't. And I saw somebody in the chat saying, you know, passing on Patrick Mahomes, and he was their number 2, but it wasn't even that. I don't think that there was not a team in the NFL that was drafting Patrick Mahomes
number 2
overall. There's just not. And if anybody says they were, they're lying to you. But you can't make the trade and draft Mitch Trubisky and then follow it up with Adam Shaheen. When they made that fucking pick, I was completely floored.
Oh,
and like I said, I'm not working in the NFL, but I take pretty serious my ability especially when it comes to the draft, when I'm looking at guys. And I was like, maybe I could be talking to Adam Shaheen in round 4, maybe more comfortable in round 5.
Oh, he was
Pace
baby
took him
Gronk.
what, 37th overall? Is that what he went? Right around there.
45th.
45th. I knew it was close.
But
Ugh.
you just look at this, and it's time and time again, and it's why we always harp the bit in our lives. The Super Bowl, the 2 times I could truly say we have focused and built properly through the draft, have led us to Super Bowl seasons. That is the 85 Bears were, especially back then, all draft, and the Lovey Bears were majority draft. When we started to get into the Wani era, it started to be the Brian Coxes and the Lewis Tillmans, and we're gonna do all of these different free agent moves, the Timpsons and all of these different guys, and you get into the Duran era, and we didn't draft quarterbacks. We never drafted quarterbacks. We never drafted offensive linemen early, and when we did, they came pre-injured. Like, for us as a franchise, this is the 3rd time in our life that we have a GM that right now is focused on building the team the right way. That is the way to be hope. You know,
it's not a quick fix, but it's the correct path.
And it's so that's, again, I keep saying it's going to take a little bit. When you have 50% turnover from last year, it's going to take a bit, but you cannot put a ceiling on this team right now because it is going to be a big season.
Totally agree. Well, we hit that magical 90-minute mark.
The last thing I just want to show, because you were asking, just real quick.
Yep.
Because of the game. So predicting Love, and we talked a lot about this. Love has accuracy issues. I don't think the defensive back group is great. I think that Bukowski is really living on 2021 Packers tape instead of what is current. Last year, they were actually one of the worst defenses in terms of time to get pressure. The Bears actually got pressure faster than the Packers. So this is a team that you could pass on. It's Love. This is going to be Love's moment. Love's team. When the plays break down and things aren't crystal clear, he does not look comfortable. And so when I say all of this, this is a very winnable game. If Christian Watson doesn't play, I think you have to win. I don't think it becomes I think you have to win overall. But if Christian Watson's there, that has to be a play. The one guy on offense that you have to watch, Daubs will be there, but he'll be a little injured. Luke Musgrave is going to be a featured part of this offense, but that is why you have Edmonds and Edwards on this team. So I'm going to go, you said 24-17. I'm going to go 27-20 Bears.
Yeah, there you go. And Musgrave is, I think, a guy that we were all excited about in the draft. It's just he comes along with that red flag designation of always nicked up, always hurt, and that doesn't get better in the NFL. But when he's healthy, he's extremely explosive.
He's got some good traits. It was the Oregon State. He was Oregon State, right? Was not great tape a lot of time, and so it was really hard to see. You could see the athletic profile. You see that Green Bay is trying to deploy him more like a Kelsey type weapon, where he's really truly more of a slot receiver than a tight end. So that's going to be, a match. But we actually have linebackers to match up with him, which not every other team does.
Yep, and you have a linebacker with length, and you cannot discount that if you're looking at Roquan, who's 5'11", 6 feet on a good day, and then you're looking at Edmonds at 6'4", 6'5". That difference in those inches can make all the difference in the world when you're covering a seam route to a Luke Musgrave, and things just look different when you have somebody that size in front of you, and the Bears have not had that since '54. Let's be honest.
And to take it a step further, when you've got a Billings and a Dexter that are mammoth men that are Dexter's 6'5", Billings big, hands up in passing lanes for bigger guys are going to be an issue for a quarterback like that who does get a lot of balls batted at the line.
Yeah, and Ricketts brings up a great point here too. 30 interceptions in 2.5 years at Utah State. put pressure on the kid, and he'll. You talk about the Bears getting turnovers. He will give you turnovers if you pressure him.
I think he'll give them to you because he nearly threw an interception in that Seattle game on a way short ball, and that has again been the thing. Yes, you're right. We need to pressure him, but he's a guy that's going to throw a few very pickable balls throughout the game, and if you capitalize on them, it's a good year, or it's a good game. Excuse me.
Can't drop him, Kyle Fuller.
Oh God, R.W. McQuarters, who's always good for that.
How things may have changed in that I still see Fuller dropping that fucking ball.
Oh, kills me to this day.
Yeah,
I try not to talk about it. I try not to think about it.
Bury it and flush it. But is that everything you got?
We're
Cars?
good.
Yeah, so we're a little bit over, but we're glad to be back. TTNL is gonna start rolling out obviously our in-season content. Bears versus Packers this weekend. As soon as that goes final, you'll see DDP and myself on BHL talking about it, breaking it all down. Hopefully we're in fantastic moods before we start our regular work week. But starting next week, you're going to see the Super 16 poll show is going to be back. After that, you're going to see Keeping It Fantasy is going to be rolling back around. Keeping It 100 always on Wednesdays, and Cars, I think, moving forward, unless we have some family obligations, we're pretty much going to be standard on Thursdays at 8:30,
except for next week, because I have to be in San Francisco for work next week. But the other one should
maybe we'll change it to Claudio's keys next week, and we'll just have Claudio live on air drooling, trying to figure out what the fuck we're talking about. That might be fun to watch.
Is his key going to be get the ball to Darnell Mooney and get the ball to Darnell Mooney?
Yeah,
and
give the ball to Rex, have him pass to Darnell,
and it's
going to be Super Bowl Bears. Oh, there it goes.
Oh wow, good job, Brian Branch, pick 6.
Yeah. Hell of a pick, man. I hated seeing him fall to Detroit in the draft.
He's a good one.
He is a good player. BHL this weekend. Let's go. Let's get it. Bears versus Packers, week 1. Let's go.
Thanks, everybody.
Getting that dub column.
Get the fuck out of bed, bitch. Go. Get up, and then they got go.